You did it. You finally decided to set aside time to plan your week before you're actually in it. And there you are with your paper or your journal or one of my momentum planners, and you got nothing. You're staring at the blank page. You have no idea what to write down. Don't worry, I got you covered. In this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, we're going to be talking about how do you brainstorm so that you make sure that you're not just coming up with stuff to do, that you're actually coming up with the stuff that is going to help you get in momentum and make the most progress towards what you want. So join me in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, where we're going to be mind mapping and brainstorming and managing expectations and designing winning environments. One of the challenges that a lot of my clients have is that they struggle to put together a good plan, whether it's for the week or the month or the year, it doesn't matter. What tends to happen is they write down whatever's front of mind, whatever has just happened, and they're not necessarily looking at the whole picture. And so they miss a lot of the details that are important as they're putting together a plan. And I like to think of it this way. When you're going to do some planning or even just strategic thinking or creative thinking for business or otherwise, you want to take a moment to land. You want to just give the ideas chance to come into your head. And I think often we're so impatient that we don't even take a second. Think of it like if you were walking across a stream and the water is perfectly clear, but then when you walk through it, it's all muddy and you can't see the bottom and it looks really cloudy. That's how your mind is most of the time. It's all cloudy and fuzzy and busy. And what you want to do before you start to plan is you want to take a moment to allow all of the mud and the silt to drop to the bottom of the stream, so that you can see the clear water and give it a chance to just settle. That's the word I'm looking for. You want to take a moment to settle. And so one of the ways that I find that is the best way to do this is mind mapping. Now, I discovered mind mapping probably a couple of decades ago. I obsess on things. It's my addictive nature. And so I'll find out about a tool and then I'll read books on it and I'll play with it and I'll use it for everything. And if it's a thing that I'm obsessing on, I'll buy it for everyone or one for every room, right? I'm sure you can relate. So when I found mind mapping, I read all the books and I remember reading books with these beautiful mind maps. I'll explain what one is in a minute, just in case you don't realize. But these beautiful mind maps with color and like trees and beautiful sketches on them. And I was a little bit intimidated, to be honest, because I'm not an artist in that way at all. And so I continued to do a little bit more research. And what I found was that mind maps actually don't need to be these gallery award-winning pieces of art. What you need in a mind map is to use colors and simple words and maybe a few visuals to help your brain really lock in what you're brainstorming. So let's rewind. A mind map is a central idea on the page. So imagine you have a piece of paper. You could grab one right now and do this as we go along. And in the middle of it, you're going to put a circle. Maybe like 2-inch diameter, something like that, in the middle of the page. That's where you're going to put your central idea. So if we're doing a mind map, which is going to help us brainstorm for the week, then you're going to write in the middle of that circle this week. That's all you need to write, okay? And then you're going to, as you think of ideas, draw little like spokes coming off from the central idea, the central theme, and they'll have little circles connected to them. So it's like this little map of circles and lines that are connected, and you're just going to write 1 or 2 words in each of the circles. That's the kind of basic overview of what a mind map is. The reason I love mind maps is because it is the way that your brain thinks. Your brain doesn't function in lists. we love lists, and I find lists very helpful when I'm checking things off and I have the organized information and it's easier to follow along when it's in a list format. But in order for me to brainstorm to get to a really good list, I'm going to do a mind map first. Your brain works in images and like individual words and different colors you can use on your mind map. That's how you remember things. So, for example, if you're doing a presentation and you want to memorize at least some of the main points that you're going to be making in the presentation, you could create a mind map where the central theme is the main idea of the presentation. And then you could have little circles coming off from that with lines for each of the main points. And then you could connect those points. You could do sub points if you wanted to. You could use different colors and just one or two words in each one. And I can guarantee you, if you create something like that and you look at it, you get that visual imprint on your brain is going to stick. And you're going to remember it better than if you make a list or look at flashcards, try to memorize a script, right? Those things are all helpful as well, but to really lock in the main ideas, a mind map is your best tool. So I'll go ahead and put a link to some examples of some mind maps below in the description too, in case my fantastic description of what a mind map is isn't quite doing it for you. But the reason I'm talking about mind maps today is because I want to help you to use it as a tool to create your weekly top 10 list. So if you've been coming along to Weekly Momentum for a little while, you know it's a 4-step process that I hope you're making a habit by now. And the 4 steps of Weekly Momentum are: step 1, to rewind the last week; step 2, to realign, to plug back in to what's important, your bigger goals; step 3 is to plan, which is where this brainstorming and mind mapping is coming in just a moment; and step 4 is where you plug it all into your schedule. Now, if you would like videos and a deep dive and worksheets and all the stuff that you need to do the full Weekly Momentum process, then I got you covered. In the description below, there is a link to the free training, Weekly Momentum 101. You can go grab that and you can get everything you need to really understand every single piece of the process. But today we're really focusing on this brainstorming piece, because if you don't do a good brainstorm, you're going to create a weekly top 10, but it's not going to be a very good list that you're creating. It's just going to be what you thought about right now while you're doing the process. It's going to be while the water is muddy, like I was just describing, not after it's settled and you can clearly see what's important and what you want to put into this week. So we're going to do a mind map together this week. You're going to grab a piece of paper. You know, when I do these retreats, I'll often get those really big pieces of paper. It doesn't have to be. You could use any size paper. But I just love those huge legal pieces of paper. So if you could grab one of those, grab one of those. And once again, in the middle of the page, about 2-inch diameter, you're going to put a circle and you're going to write in it this week. That's the beginning of the mind map. Now I'm going to take you through 4 distinct layers of questions that I'm going to ask you. And you're going to see, you're going to fill this page with information. And what I want you to remember, more importantly than anything else, is this is brainstorming. You are not committing to what you write down. You are just catching the raindrops, I like to think of it. As brainstorming is just sitting there with your hands, just catching the raindrops. So that sometimes the best ideas, the thing that's going to really make the most progress, or that brilliant idea, comes right at the end after all the other stuff has been put on the page. So when we just sit there and we catch the raindrops of all of these ideas, as I guide you through with these 4 different sections, I wouldn't be surprised if you have some different ideas than you've had before. Your intuition will have an opportunity to be heard, and perhaps it's going to make all the difference as you move through your week. I'd love to hear if, by the way, something that you do discover from our brainstorming and mind mapping today. If it does end up being like a big aha moment for you, please write it in the comments. I love to hear how things are resonating and what's showing up and how this magic is working for you. It really lights me on fire to hear that. So we're going to go through 4 different groups of kind of areas of questions that I'm going to use. And for those of you with my momentum planner, the 90-day planner, you see there's this brainstorming section at the top of the weekly top 10. If you're watching the video I'm showing you right now, otherwise you can just imagine there is a page in the planner. On the bottom half of it is the weekly top 10. On the top half is a blank white space. It's designed to brainstorm. It's designed to do what we're going to do right now. However, I often like to use a different piece of paper because I want more room than this, but you can absolutely do it on half a sheet of paper works as well. But the reason I bring up the planner is that there's 4 corners to the planner with each has a different color. And those are the 4 different types of areas we're going to explore as I do the mind mapping right now. So I wanted you to see that there's a method to my madness and you can replicate this and you have little reminders for those of you that have the planner. Now, if you don't have one of my planners yet, go grab one of my Momentum 90-day planners. I'll drop the link in the description. They're available in the store on the website. So the first thing I think we're going to start with, yes, we're going to start with agreements. So in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little triangle and it says agreements, right? So the first thing we're going to brainstorm, remember there's going to be 4 different layers. They can go anywhere on the page. Don't worry about, I'm going to put all of these ones in this section and all of it. Like just fill it on the page. The process of doing this is more important than even like looking at it regularly. You're just going to do the process and then you're going to highlight which are the top 10. So it doesn't have to look perfect, does not need to be a piece of art that you're going to hang in a museum. So the first group of questions is all around agreements. So what I mean by that is to start with, and I'll ask you questions and you'll just write down words or things that come to mind as I ask you these questions in real time. So the first thing is, what do you feel like you have to do this week? And oftentimes we feel that way because we've made an agreement with someone. I will deliver X on this date. Or maybe you even have, maybe you're overdue on some items, right? So you really feel like you have to deliver, right? So what do you feel like you have to do or deliver or create or produce like this week? Let's start with that level because honestly, that's where the list usually is constructed from because we feel that sense of obligation, that feeling of guilt, of overwhelm. And a lot of the things that we feel that about are things that we've made agreements, maybe with ourselves, often with other people, that we would do and we haven't done yet. So let's at least put that layer on the mind map to start with, so that then you'll free up your mind and you'll be able to look in other directions with the other prompts. So think about with work, with your clients, with your customers, what do you feel like you have to do this week? Now, once again, that doesn't mean that you will. You're just writing it down right now, so it's there for consideration. Think of this almost like if you're going to go on a trip. Like, I really want to go on a cruise right now. It's been like over a year. Come on already. It's time for a cruise. And when I go on a cruise, I don't pack lightly. I get bruises on my arms from carrying all my suitcases. But still, even with as many suitcases as I can bring on one of my cruises, I can't bring all the clothes and all the things that I want to, right? So what I have to do is I lay things out and then whatever fits in the suitcase fits in the suitcase, and that's what I bring with me. Now, as we're doing this mind mapping, that's you laying out all the things that you might bring with you, but we're going to pack once we've done this, and only 10 items are going to come with you, okay? So you're not committing to anything you're writing down. It's okay to write it on the page just for consideration, like it's up for an award, okay? So what are some of the things for your clients, for your customers, maybe for family members, maybe for a spouse that you feel like you have to do this week? Maybe start to, once you've looked at that, maybe you're on a board or you're in a nonprofit or a volunteer. Is there some stuff you feel like you have to do? Sometimes it might be that you have to do it. Sometimes there might be another approach you can use. And finally, in this area of agreements, what agreements have you made to yourself? What do you feel like you have to do this week that you promised yourself? You know, when I talk about agreements, of course, the Four Agreements book comes to mind, right? It's so important that we start to become impeccable with our word. That's one of the agreements. And really get into the hang of under-promising and over-delivering, even with ourselves. And the more that you begin to acknowledge the things that you're agreeing to and that you feel like you have to do, you'll start to see it on the page. It may very well start to plug that hole a little bit so that you don't promise as much going forward and you create a little bit more space for yourself just by doing this exercise. So last few minutes or last few seconds of just writing down just anywhere on the page, right? You can't do this wrong. Just making a note of what comes to mind when you think about what do you have to do this week. All right, we're going to go to a super fun one now because that first one, those agreements, yes, it's not necessarily the most fun things that you're writing down there, right? I'm going to take a guess that a lot of things you wrote down didn't get you all lit up and excited and they weren't tied in with your passion. So let's fan the flames of your passion a little bit now and move into the top left-hand corner, which is all about desire, right? So if you could do anything this week, anything, what would you do? Now, please do not limit. You're dreaming right now. Don't dim your lights. You can dream. It's okay. This is an excellent opportunity for you to really remind yourself of what really lights you up. If you could do anything this week, and what comes up for you is that you would love to be in Paris, then write down be in Paris. Now, I don't want to get too logical about this, but pretty much anything that you could write down, even if it doesn't feel feasible right this second or this week, there's maybe ways you can bring a little bit of that into this week. Maybe you go out and have a croissant and a lovely coffee somewhere at a French patisserie in your hometown, right? So there are ways to do it, but that's not why we're doing the exercise. You don't have to find ways to make it happen. I just want you to brainstorm here and write down, really listen. If you could do anything right now this week, what would you be doing? And part of it might be things to do with the way that you work, who you might hang out with, who you might be connecting with, how you might be spending your time. Some of it might be about a trip or being in a different place or having a massage or a spa day, right? No matter what your week actually looks like, please do not look at the reality. I want you to dream and just tune in to if you could do anything this week, what would you do? And sometimes the things that come up when we just give ourselves the opportunity to answer something like this are pretty simple and easy as well. It's just we get so caught up in the busyness that we're not listening to what we really want anymore. So this level of exploration as you're brainstorming is really, really a key part of you getting the full 360-degree vision of what's really cooking. Sometimes I used to call the mind mapping process just like what's cooking, because that's what we're doing. It's all in your head. It's bubbling, it's percolating. All of this is in there anyway. We are not making anything up. It's in your head already. However, most of the time you just ignore it and just write a list. So what we're doing is really mining for gold. We're looking at what's in there. And there's something that it's almost like a big feeling of relief that can happen when you give yourself the opportunity to just get it all on the page. Even though you know you're not committing to doing these things, there is a relief that happens, like an exhale, like the weight off your shoulders when you just write it down. It's like you're honoring your agreements in the first level of questions, and then in the second set, you're actually honoring your desires and letting them know, yes, I still want to hear from you. I still want to know about it, right? So now let's move into the third set of questions. I'm going to go to expectations. So the top right-hand corner of the brainstorming page, where do you want to be by the end of this week? So oftentimes we make a list, like I want to do all of these things. And I'll say to a client, okay, that's great, but where do you want to be by the end of this week? And they'll say, well, I want to have, got 5 new clients, or I want to have finished creating this new speech that I want to do to start booking speaking gigs, right? Or I want to have written the first chapter of my book, right? So that we all have a clear idea of our expectations of where we would like to be by the end of the week. But often the list that we make of the things that we're going to do isn't going to take us there. So we really can benefit from taking the time to just ask ourselves, where do I expect to be by the end of the week? So we can maybe reverse engineer a little bit and build some of those things into the weekly top 10 instead of just hoping that we're going to get there. We can actually create a pathway to get to the expectation. And expectations, oh my goodness, it's such a juicy topic because we have expectations about everything. So when I ask you right now, where do you expect to be by the end of the week? You might sit there and go, well, I don't know, but you do have an expectation. We have an expectation. Okay, this week I'll probably be at this part of this project and I will have this done, right? Just pause and ask yourself that question and you will see that you do have expectations. A lot of times though, we just ignore them or we just override them. But they're going to be there. And if we don't at least put them on the page, even though sometimes our expectations are absurd. I have a lot of absurd expectations. Like the amount of progress I expect to make or how far I expect to get to in a project is absurd. And when I look at my days and my weeks, that's why I created all of these tools. Because at least when I take a moment and I say, where do I expect to be by the end of today? And I realize and I write it all down, I can then catch my breath and go, oh, that's not feasible. And I can then renegotiate my expectations. But if you don't ask yourself about your expectations and write them down, then they're just bugging you the whole day. And at the end of the day, you might have done everything on your list, but you expected to do more and you don't feel good. So asking yourself, what are my expectations? Where do I expect to be by the end of this week? And this can be in your work, it could be with your clients, it could be in terms of building your business, it might be in terms of personal, it might be in terms of monetary or spiritual or creating a product or a service. It could be anything. Just write down and really listen to what your expectations are, because you can start to harness those a little bit. And not only will you start to build a better list by asking all of these questions, you'll also get more insight into what's really important to you and what you want, and begin to maybe manage your thinking and your expectations. So the final question is something I don't talk about nearly enough on this podcast, and that is winning environments. And so the example that I like to use is The Biggest Loser, the TV show. It's a show, if you've never seen it, where it's a place where people go on the TV reality show when they want to lose weight. And the house is full that they go into of foods that are going to help them gain weight, not lose weight, right? So there's candy and fried chicken and carbs and potato chips all over the counters, the tables, the cupboards are full. There's milkshakes and chocolate. The whole house is full of temptation. And so that house is a winning environment for them to gain weight, but it is not a winning environment for them to lose weight in. And here's what I want you to hear loud and clear. The environment that you're in always wins. It's always going to win, because as human beings, when we're put in a situation like with The Biggest Loser, and there's all of those temptations, at some point you cave into the temptations because it's easy. It's right there. It's too hard not to. And so If you then take that logic and you flip it, and you make sure you're designing environments that, yes, are still going to win, but they're going to get you to the result that you want, then you're using this idea of designing winning environments to your advantage. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you're working on a project, one of my clients, for example, is phenomenal. Like, just talk about just going back to the basics. She's great at sending thank you cards to her clients, sending little notes, really keeping in touch with them. It's one of her money-making activities that she does almost every day. And so for her to create a winning environment for that, this is such a great little example. On her desk, she's got the envelopes with the stamps on already. She's already got beautiful cards that she's excited to send to her clients or her leads. And she has the address labels and she has return labels. You get the gist of it, right? So she's designed this winning environment. So it's so easy to send a little card. Now, let me ask you this. How many times have you thought, I want to send a little thank you card? And then you haven't because the environment won. You have no cards, you have no stamps, you don't have the label, your writing's messy, right? You don't know the person's address. The environment is winning. It's winning in that you're not going to do that. So you want to, as much as you possibly can, create environments for yourself. It's another way of thinking of systems. Systems are just kind of environmental design, right? But you want to create environments for yourself where it's easier to do the task that you need to do in that environment than to not do it. So with all of that in mind, I want you to think about, and here's the question, if I can get it the right way up. How can you create some winning environments for yourself this week? So if you start to think about some of the things that you want to do, you might think about how you can buy the stamps and get the envelopes and have the labels printed, right? That kind of stuff. Another really good way to approach this, though, which really cuts to the chase, is to really look at what is not working. What is slowing you down? You know, as we move through our day for work, it's like there's resistance, resistance, resistance. There's speed bumps that are slowing us down. It's that, you know, we have to go all the way to the other room to get X or Y, or the files aren't organized properly, or we don't have, here's a great example. Clients that are wanting to access software on their computer, but they haven't done a bookmark for it. So every single time they're like, where is that? What was it called? How do I get to that software? Or your passwords, having those in a place where it's easy to find them and they're filled in. Those are winning environments, right? But a lot of times we're just feeling angst around these things. So if there's things that are slowing you down, what if you just started to write down a couple of those things that are losing environments on your mind map right now? And just start to imagine if you were to create them and flip them on their head and make them winning environments, what would you need to shift? And honestly, it's little things. And I cannot even begin to tell you how much joy you will feel, at least at the beginning, right? With that kind of like that new car feeling when it is flowing and you no longer are stubbing your foot on the chair because you've moved it to a different corner of the office, right? Just finding the ways that you can streamline the environment. The easiest ones to think about are the physical environments if you're new to this, and to really think and brainstorm on the page right now, what would that winning environment, some of them look like this week? And you've got that on the page. Now, by now, you should have quite a lot on this page as we've been brainstorming. Now, one thing that I do want you to keep in mind is I want to add in one last layer, and that is, you know, step one is rewind the last week, right? Step two is realign. And so I want to bring in the realign step to this. And realigning just means reminding yourself what your bigger goals are. It's a really fancy way of just saying, look at your annual goal and look at your 90-day plan, right? So do that right now. And I want you to write on the brainstorming page here, what could you do to move forward towards those this week? You don't have to do everything that you write down, remember. You're just brainstorming. Give yourself permission to write things down. Those of you who do the annual roadmap with me, who've been to some of my retreats, then you have 5 projects that you could look at. How could you move forward with? You've got also your 12 life areas you could look at, and you could write down if you wanted to move forward in any of those areas. Please don't feel an obligation to just write something down for everything just because I'm saying this. I hope what I'm doing is just sparking ideas for you so that you can start to really make sure that you're creating a really good brainstorm before we move into the next step. So, all of this information is on the page. It's a lot. Is there anything else? Listen. Listen to your intuition. Give it an opportunity. Imagine the stream that I talked about at the beginning that was all muddy, and then we were going to let it settle. Let it settle. Catch some raindrops. Any great ideas? The more time you give yourself to just be and receive information, you'll be amazed at what you receive. I've been so busy for so many years, and I slowed it down, and then I sped it up again and overloaded again, and then I streamlined it again, as I said in the last podcast. And what I've noticed is I've been receiving some really, really great little breadcrumbs, kind of like Hansel and Gretel. You get one breadcrumb, and then you follow it to the next breadcrumb and the next breadcrumb, right? And you make your way out of the forest. And I've been doing that, and it's because of this settling and just allowing and listening and receiving. For example, I was just doing my weekly momentum process, gone through everything we just did, and I was just sitting in the settle phase about 2 months ago. And I thought, I really want to do a 90-day planning workshop. I was like, no, I said, I'm not going to do anything alive. But I could tell that idea was coming from deep within me. It wasn't coming from my logical brain. I could feel the difference. And I just leaned into a little bit. I said, what if I did? And I just put the feelers out. And I said, what about using this location? And who would be interested in coming? And one breadcrumb after another. And before I knew it, it was this incredible workshop that we did that created all kinds of breakthroughs. I found it so satisfying, and the ladies loved it. And it all came from just settling, listening, allowing, receiving some of these ideas. So don't miss that step. Now, look at everything on the page. And what I want you to do as we move now into step 3, which is to plan officially, the bottom half of the page, if you're following along on the worksheet. Once again, if you need the worksheets, the videos, all the explanation of the 4-step process, Weekly Momentum 101, the link is in the description below. So you want to now pick out 10 items for your weekly top 10. So now you have a better smorgasbord of things to pick from instead of whatever comes to mind. I want you to really sit with it. Imagine it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're going to use a pencil, right? You got to use a pencil because you're going to change your mind. So you put some items, you might even, on the mind map, you might just highlight the ones that you feel are candidates for the top 10 so you can narrow it down. And then you gradually whittle it down to 10. But you're going to start writing them down on your weekly top 10 list. And notice how it makes you feel as you look at that list. Do you feel like you need to adjust something? And there might be this tendency that you feel that you want to cram it all in. That's the ambition trap, ladies. That's this desire, this passion, this excitement that we have, and we want to do it all. But when we do that, we just end the week feeling overwhelmed. We have overpromised and we've underdelivered, and that feels awful. So there's other weeks. There's other opportunities. Create this week so it can really shine, that it can take some of your big, bold ideas and move them forward instead of attempting to get everything into your weekly top 10. Because I know you can be sneaky and you can you can bundle ideas together and get everything on that weekly top 10. But that's kind of like when you try to pack your suitcase and shove it all in and close it up and then the zipper breaks. And you don't want that to happen to your week. What I want to happen for you is I want you to feel like you have this suitcase, it's packed perfectly. You could buy a couple more items while you're out on your trip if you want, because we know there's going to be other stuff that comes up during the week. So why not pack ready with space for the things that you don't know about yet, so you can seize opportunities instead of overpacking the case from the beginning. So pick your 10 items like a jigsaw puzzle, put them together. Really make this the most consideration that you've invested in putting together your weekly top 10 ever before. And curate it to make it the most marvelous list that you cannot keep your butt in the seat and can't wait to do. So once you've got your weekly top 10, you want to plug it in. And this is a little bit of a way of having kind of a safety net. If you look at each of the items on the weekly top 10, ask yourself for each item, how many Pomodoros would it take you to do that? And a Pomodoro, if you're not familiar with it, I have a whole playlist on the YouTube channel about Pomodoros. But in a nutshell, it is 25-minute time block with a 3 to 5 minute break. So how many 25-minute time blocks would it take you to complete each of the items on your weekly top 10? Write that down, because even that step alone may get you to rethink and maybe write down some smaller items. Better to do that at the beginning before you go off on the cruise and you've got that overstuffed suitcase. I want you to really check in and make sure you've just packed the right things and there's plenty of room to spare. So you're going to figure out how many Pomodoros each item is, and then look at your week and literally make sure that you can fit those time blocks on the week. You don't have to say exactly when you're going to do what. I don't like I feel like I'm being boxed in when every single minute on my week is planned. But you do want to make sure that if you are going to need 20 or 30 Pomodoros to do everything that's on the weekly top 10, you better make sure that you have 20 or 30 Pomodoros available on your calendar on your week. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure. You want to under-promise and over-deliver. So what we've done today is we've moved fairly quickly through some of the steps, but we've gone through all 4 steps of the weekly momentum planning process. I have really dived into brainstorming so that you can create a better list, and your weekly top 10 is going to thank you for it. I hope this method of brainstorming is helpful for you. If you had some magical ideas, or if you have a question, if something didn't make sense, or if you have something that you really love that we shared today, then please make sure to write a comment and let me know. I love hearing from everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Weekly Momentum.